I'm going to tell you about a new way that we've been trying to address the eternal dilemma of how to have the biggest impact on the welfare of the most dogs, given limited budgets, people, and time. We wanted to know if it was possible to meaningfully help communities address dog population management concerns without offering to fund them. Wherever we work around the world, we all face some of the same challenges. They're almost always people challenges rather than dog challenges. Although we're pretty good at deciding what should be done with the dogs, our efforts are often derailed by people who disagree or misinterpret the goals of an intervention, or who aren't sufficiently motivated to keep work going once the NGO money has gone away. We know that resources and positive human behaviours are vital to creating sustainable guardianship for dogs, and that for this to be sustained, it has to be valued by the whole community: police, dog owners, teachers, farmers, and everyone else. This is where we as a movement so often don't succeed. We designed our initiative on the hypothesis that we can plan for sustainability by focusing more thoroughly on the people whose motivation is critical to sustaining any dog population management project. The Humane community development process is designed to improve dog welfare by empowering people. With all of this as inspiration and the example of others using social science to make progress on complex issues, we developed what we hoped would be a framework for people to develop a shared understanding of their concerns about dogs and to unite in their efforts to improve their situation. The framework we crafted is based on the premise that if people are involved in developing plans for their community, they are more likely to do the work necessary and will have a commitment to it that may mean that plans outlive political or other social cycles. Humane community development is a combination of community mentoring and very carefully designed stakeholder workshops, which helps communities learn about their own situations and identify strategies which are appropriate for that specific situation. We don't tell or even suggest to the communities what they should do. Instead, through various exercises, they take on ownership of the process and product, and it is this crucial transfer of ownership that we believed would empower them and ultimately result in change. We started to pilot this approach about 18 months ago, and what I'm sharing with you today is what we've learned so far. It's very much a work in progress. We've learned and adapted as we go, and we continue to do so. The first of the 4 stages in our framework is the development of a strong relationship with whichever entity has requested the process, be it a local municipality or an NGO. Wider stakeholder engagement comes later. We confirm that they understand that we will help them create their own plan, that we will not be designing or doing it for them. In the second stage, everyone who is impacted by the dogs or can impact them is identified and their participation is actively sought. We're assessing whether the people who would contribute to the success or failure of an intervention are actually capable of having a respectful dialogue, or at least one which can be facilitated without descending into fisticuffs. Stage 3 is where we bring the stakeholders together and start to build consensus and commitments. The stakeholder workshops are an absolutely vital component of this whole framework. We have designed them very carefully to achieve specific outcomes. Openings, closings, every exercise, and even the timing of breaks are all carefully designed to foster participation, confidence, and learning from within the group. Stage 4 is where the community actually gets on with implementing their plan and monitoring it. We'll provide an additional facilitated workshop designed to help them examine the results of their work at the end of 12 months, with a process for adjusting their plan as necessary based on what has happened and what they've learned so far over the course of the year. At the outset, we also identified some prerequisites for ourselves. The community must ask for the process. As I said at the start, we know that while service provision can be persuasive, we wanted to see if the communities themselves would generate actual desire and commitment. We also need a partner organisation to be a day-to-day mentor for the community. When we first started exploring this concept, we thought that we'd be offering ourselves as facilitators, but the importance of having a partner, and the right one, to actually be that mentor and local facilitator quickly became very evident. We can be more effective and will be better able to spread our impact if we can train the mentor rather than be the mentor. This is also really important because it shifts the power dynamic in the group, which so often leads to communities or groups developing plans based on what they think the funder wants to hear. Our last prerequisite was that some efforts to manage the dog population must already be in place. We felt that we could only try this in places where resources were already being used and could be realigned more effectively. We know too well that there are places in the world that are so under-resourced that there is nothing to be realigned, and all we can do is service provision. This is a development model, not the aid model that may be more appropriate, where people themselves are dependent on aid for survival. We were really pleased that right when we were developing this framework, we found 2 new partners that have proven invaluable as we've piloted and refined the process. The United Nations Development Programme in Bosnia and Herzegovina had unexpectedly found dog population management as part of their mandate, after a community security survey had identified roaming dogs as a human security threat, and they approached us for advice. The GARP had been working in Chile and was trying to work out how to address these same challenges in Puerto Natales. Elena Garda will talk in depth about their experiences with this framework later on. While humane community development is very much an entire framework, the workshops and their careful design are key components. So I want to take a moment to talk through them. These are highly participatory events where the groups move together towards shared understanding and unified action. We have people share thoughts, we prompt discussion, and we help them ask each other difficult questions. The first workshop is the first time that the stakeholders actually come together. And of course, they all come in with their own priorities, their personal perceptions of the problems, and their strongly held convictions about what the solutions might be. So we've built in exercises that allow each voice and every point of view to be heard. Participants then feel understood, actively listen to others, and develop a shared understanding of their problems and perceptions. They share what they've already done in their community so that their efforts are recognized. Once they feel heard, valued, and safe in the group, they can more objectively take a step back and look at what's happening in their community. They explore the root causes of the dogs on their streets, which so often is people, and develop a visual map of sources of dogs in their community so they can identify what they need to know in order to identify where they could intervene most effectively. During that first workshop, the group decides, through the exercises, that they may have been working on some assumptions. Imagine that. And they identify data they can collect to test those assumptions, as well as some baseline information that will help them monitor the impact of their plans. These are pictures of Elzamina actually out in the field collecting data from the community in Bosnia. So far, these data needs have turned out to be more about the knowledge, attitude, and actual behavior of the community than about absolute numbers of dogs, which seems to reflect the community's new shared understanding of their need to focus on changing human behavior. At the planning workshop, the group explores the data they've collected, then they actually go through the process of developing a plan for themselves. We demonstrate how to make a plan using a locally appropriate example, such as making a cup of coffee, which in Bosnia is an incredibly involved endeavour. But actually, in this workshop, both the partner organisation and I4 take a real step back. By this point, the group is functioning as a cohesive unit, with a shared understanding of their problems, the sources of those problems. I clicked too soon. The source of those problems, their shared values, and agreement on the strategies that can be effective and efficient. So we simply observe and answer specific technical questions as they put their plan together, identifying milestones, who will do what, when, how it will be paid for, and how success will be measured. As they do all this, they are keenly aware that the plan they develop must be based in reality. We have not held out any offer of assistance beyond initial startup seed funding, and we've been really clear that even that will only be available if their plan is demonstrably locally sustainable. The plans have to be approved by the municipal leadership, and our partner organisation has to say that they think it has a good chance of being sustained if they are even to be considered for startup assistance. We're piloting this process in 5 communities. Puerto Natales in Chile, and 4 very different communities in Bosnia. 3 of these communities have reached the point of finalizing their plans and are starting implementation, and the other 2 are just putting the finishing touches to their plans at the moment. At each of these sites, the stakeholder working groups have been composed of a broad cross-section of the community. Across the sites, almost all of the people who attended the first workshop returned for the second workshop, and it was very interesting that when new members who hadn't been at the first workshop turned up at the second, the people who had been at the first really quickly filled them in on what they'd learned so far. Just last week I heard about a new member who turned up at a meeting in Sanski Most, Bosnia, from an animal rescue group. And during the first workshop, the group had identified the likelihood that most of the dogs on their streets had some form of guardianship, as some people have been talking about already. So when this lady said, "So we're talking about abandoned dogs, right?" all the group said, "No." In fact, a policeman actually stood up and pointed out the window and said, "There, that dog crossing the road right there, that dog probably has somebody who cares about it and feeds it." This is really nice confirmation that the group work identifying the human component of their dog problems is powerful and lasting. So did the groups develop humane plans that will be sustainable and resilient based on local resources? One of the key exercises in the planning workshop is the documentation of the group's shared values, and each group kept humane firmly on their values list. This is a word cloud of the values of the 5 groups developed, and the size of the words reflects how often it was used. As you can see, the strategies they chose are not especially unusual, but as one of our partners observed, it's about who is doing it, not what they are doing. All the community's plans intended to be humane, and our technical advice was only really needed when it was clear that they didn't have all the knowledge or experience that we do. There were mostly things like making sure the local vets polish up their sterilization skills before doing surgery, and prompting a bit on making sure that what they call education campaigns are actually social marketing campaigns aimed at changing human behavior. So far, the communities have explained how they will fund the work on an ongoing basis, and with the combined planning expertise of IFOR, the UNDP and GARP, we believe that the 3 plans we've approved so far have a strong chance of being sustainable based on local resources. I hope to see you in about a year to report on that. However, perhaps the most exciting thing to come out of this work is its power to develop the ownership, personal commitment and optimism that the literature suggests gives the project the best chances of surviving changing circumstances. After the first workshop, across all sites, 77% of those surveyed reported having meaningful change in perspective about their problems with dogs, with 32% reporting an entirely new perspective and 45% reporting a lot of change in perspective. Across all the sites, 73% of those surveyed reported having meaningful change in perspective about what needs to be done about the problems with dogs, with about 35% reporting an entirely new perspective and 39% reporting a lot of change in perspective. Participants were more willing to be active in addressing problems with dogs in the community after the workshop. Since these methods aren't tracking individuals, it's impossible to say which people are changing, but overall there's a significant shift in willingness to be active. There wasn't a significant further increase in projected personal engagement after workshop 2, but at that point, 95% of respondents said they would be very active or somewhat active. Respondents were not so confident in their ability to influence what happens with the dogs in their community, with the majority of respondents, 49%, suggesting that they would have some influence over what happens with dogs in their communities. The 0% at the top here is the one things will probably not improve, because I know there are 2 blues on there, it could be confusing. This is interesting because it may actually reflect how these communities are not structured or comfortable working through unelected group decision-making. But it does offer interesting and important insights into the need to further empower communities and individuals, or identify what else would help them feel more empowered. So at this point in the pilot, the results suggest that the groups overwhelmingly develop humane solutions. The groups that have finalized their plans seem to have very good chance of being sustainable based on local resources. They feel confident that together they've chosen the right solutions. They're personally committed to staying engaged in the implementation of those solutions, and they feel optimistic that change is not only possible, but likely. Lastly, when we first started developing the workshops, we knew that we would encounter some resistance. Action-orientated people start out questioning the value of sharing staunchly held differences of opinion and what can be seen as games with sticky notes. But at the end, when asked if people liked the activities, in general, people reported that they really liked the workshop format. People responded very positively to the level of engagement and the use of activities to keep a long meeting more fun and not boring. They appreciated the openness and transparency. The piece of this work for which we haven't hard data is the importance and value of culturally appropriate refreshments. We know what happens when we bring dogs together over snacks, but we found that bringing people together over coffee, we can achieve some very positive outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Becky, for the excellent presentation and reminding us of engaging and listening to the community and importance of developing a bespoke approach for dog population management. May I invite any questions to our presenter from the audience, please?
Oh, come on, I want to talk about this stuff.
Excellent. On that note, we have some time, so may I also open up just a couple of questions for if there are any questions for all the presenters.
It's the after lunch session before coffee.
Great. Thank you very much. In that case, to all the presenters, keep on going to ask the question.
I'm Deepa from GOC. I just wondered how easily can this be replicated with other organizations and in other countries? I know you've mentioned Bosnia and...
We have we've piloted it in Bosnia. We've done it in 3 really different communities in Bosnia and in Chile, and we feel that the process and the basic structure of the workshops and the process is really pretty robust. We're just also piloting it in a First Nations community in Canada as well, but it obviously has to be tailored according to local situations as well. So it's not, we know there's no cookie cutter solution, but this may be a framework within which some tailoring can happen.
Hi, I'm Donna from the Sarawak SPCA, which is a part of Malaysia. I just like to know how big or how small of a community that you would work with in doing such a workshop.
The communities vary in size, and we purposefully chose quite small communities. So 60,000, none of them are more than 100,000 people. And they're spread out across rural sections and more urban sections. All of the workshops that we've had have ranged between 20 and 30 people. And that's about what's manageable in terms of group management.
So you're dealing with community leaders?
No, not at all. We're dealing with anybody who can impact or be impacted by the dogs. So we do an extensive stakeholder assessment at the beginning to find out who should be in the room, because we purposefully don't want it to be just the leaders. We need to have the people who really care and who really are impacted in the room. So we have hunters and farmers and hoarders and everybody in between.
Okay, and then how do you evaluate the stakeholders? Do you do it yourself, or?
Our partner organisations have done that through whichever entity has invited us there, and so they go and have interviews, telephone interviews, in-person interviews, and focus groups in the communities to identify who needs to be there.
Thank you, Becky.
Thank you.
And thank you. One last question from Ellie.
Hi, Ellie Hebe from the ICAM Coalition. Becky, do you have a feel for how much they've changed their ideas about the intervention through this process? So their final intervention plan and what they had in mind when they first came that needs to be done for the dogs. Do you have any feel for how different that is?
We have only from how much they feel, how the slide I showed about the difference how much they feel their opinion has changed, and that they feel, we do have the data on how solidly they feel that the solutions they've chosen have been the right ones, but not that specific question, because we don't ask them coming in, what do you think should be done, because it's kind of loading the dice.
Thank you.